Millionaire asked a poor little girl to draw him. Her drawing revealed the secret in his heart. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and type Amen in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The late autumn rain pelted against the towering glass walls of Carson Industries as Richard Carson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city below blur into watercolor streaks. At 35, he commanded an empire worth billions, his name synonymous with ruthless efficiency and unparalleled success. Yet as he adjusted his platinum Patek Philippe watch and straightened his perfectly tailored Armani suit, the reflection staring back at him revealed hollow grey eyes that had forgotten how to feel genuine joy. The mahogany desk behind him was pristine, cleared of everything except a single leather-bound planner and a crystal paperweight that caught the dying light like a frozen tear. 20 floors below, the evening rush hour painted ribbons of red and white across the rain-slicked streets, thousands of people hurrying home to families, to warmth, to lives that mattered beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. Richard's Italian leather shoes clicked against the polished marble floor as he moved toward his private elevator. The sound echoed through the vast office space, bouncing off walls lined with awards, accolades, and photographs of handshakes with presidents and prime ministers. None of those achievements could fill the gnawing emptiness that had consumed him for the past 6 years, a void so profound that success had become merely noise, masking the silence of a broken heart. The elevator descended smoothly, its mirrored walls reflecting multiple versions of a man who had everything and nothing simultaneously. His angular jaw was clean-shaven, his salt-and-pepper hair meticulously styled, his grey eyes sharp with the intelligence that had built his fortune. Yet, beneath the expensive facade lived a soul so wounded that most days he moved through life like a ghost inhabiting his own body. As the doors opened onto the executive floor, the familiar sound of a cleaning cart's squeaky wheel reached his ears. Sarah Martinez emerged from his office suite, pushing her supply-laden cart with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to find purpose in service. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing the elegant curve of her neck and the tired but beautiful features that spoke of a woman who had faced hardship with grace. "Good evening, Mr. Carson," Sarah called softly, her voice carrying the warmth of someone genuinely glad to see another human being. At 32, she'd been cleaning his office for 3 years, arriving after hours when the building grew quiet and the fluorescent lights hummed their lonely songs. Her brown eyes, though touched by exhaustion from working multiple jobs, still held a kindness that made Richard feel almost human again. "Evening, Sarah," Richard replied, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken burdens. He had learned her name only recently, despite their years of brief encounters. Before the last few months, she had been invisible to him, part of the building's furniture, existing in the periphery of his self-absorbed world. Behind Sarah's legs, a small figure emerged like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Mia Martinez peeked out with bright blue eyes that seemed to hold starlight, her blonde hair catching the hallway's fluorescent glow like spun gold. At 10 years old, she possessed that rare combination of innocence and wisdom that sometimes blessed children who had witnessed both profound loss and enduring love. Her small hands clutched a worn purple backpack decorated with fading unicorn stickers, its contents the treasures of childhood, colored pencils worn down to nubs, sketch pads filled with dreams, erasers shaped like cartoon characters, and crayons that had created countless worlds on paper. She had been coming to these late-night cleaning sessions since she was 7, transforming the sterile business environment into something more human simply by being present. "Mama, can I show Mr. Carson the picture I drew today?" Mia whispered, tugging on her mother's navy blue uniform sleeve with the persistent enthusiasm only children possess. Her voice carried the musical quality of youth, each word colored with excitement and hope. Sarah's cheeks flushed the soft pink of embarrassment. "Sweetheart, Mr. Carson is very busy. He has important business to attend to." She smoothed her daughter's hair with a gesture so tender it made Richard's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. But Richard found himself pausing, something stirring in the frozen landscape of his heart. Over the past several months, he had begun to notice things previously invisible, the way Sarah hummed softly while she worked, the careful attention Mia paid to her homework at the small break-room table, the drawings scattered across surfaces like fallen leaves of imagination. The child's artwork was extraordinary, far beyond what he would expect from someone her age. Her sketches captured not just physical appearance, but something deeper, the essence of her subjects, their hidden emotions, the stories written in the lines around their eyes and the set of their shoulders. Her portrait of the building's security guard had included details Richard himself had never noticed. The man's gentle smile, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his eyes crinkled with genuine warmth when he greeted people. "Actually," Richard heard himself saying, the words surprising him as much as Sarah, "I have a few minutes. I'd like to see what you've created, Mia." The transformation in the child's face was instantaneous and brilliant. Her blue eyes lit up like Christmas morning, and she practically bounced on her toes as she dug through her backpack with the focused determination of an archaeologist uncovering treasure. "Really, you want to see?" she asked, her voice climbing an octave with excitement. She produced a spiral notebook with a rainbow cover, its pages stuffed with sketches that peeked out like eager butterflies waiting to take flight. Sarah watched nervously as Mia flipped through page after page of artwork. There were flowers that seemed to dance on the paper, buildings that reached toward cloudless skies, and people whose faces told stories of joy and sorrow, hope and despair. Each drawing revealed a level of emotional intelligence that made adults uncomfortable, as if the child could see straight through to their souls. "Here!" Mia announced triumphantly, finding the page she sought. She held up a half-finished portrait of Marcus, the building's night security guard, rendered in colored pencil with stunning accuracy. But more than accuracy, she had captured his essence. The kindness in his eyes, the patience in his smile, the way he made everyone feel safe and welcome. "You're very talented, Mia," Richard said, genuinely amazed. He had seen professional artists whose work lacked the emotional depth this 10-year-old achieved with children's art supplies. "How did you learn to draw like this?" Mia shrugged with the casual humility of someone unaware of their own gift. "I don't know. I just look at people really hard, and then I see them with my heart instead of just my eyes. Sometimes I see things that aren't there yet, or things that used to be there." A chill ran down Richard's spine at her words, though he couldn't say why. "Things that used to be there?" "Like memories," Mia explained, tilting her head thoughtfully. "Or feelings that got lost, or people who went away but are still there somehow." She looked up at him with those impossibly blue eyes. "Would you like me to draw you sometime, Mr. Carson? Sometimes when I draw people, I can help them find things they lost." The question hung in the air like a bridge between worlds, innocent on the surface, but carrying undercurrents Richard couldn't understand. In his realm of corporate strategy and calculated risks, no one asked anything so simple, so pure, so completely without agenda. "I suppose that would be interesting," he found himself saying, though something deep within him recoiled from the idea. The thought of those perceptive eyes studying him, of those talented hands revealing truths he had buried beneath years of carefully constructed emotional armor, both intrigued and terrified him. "Wonderful!" Mia clapped her hands together, the sound echoing through the quiet hallway like applause from angels. I'll bring it tomorrow when Mama finishes cleaning your office. It'll be special. I can already feel it tingling in my fingers." Sarah shifted uncomfortably at her daughter's words. "Mia, honey, remember what we talked about? Some people don't understand when you say things like that." "But Mr. Carson seems different," Mia replied with the straightforward honesty of childhood. "He has sad eyes, but there's something golden way down deep inside them. Like he's keeping a treasure locked up where nobody can steal it, but he forgot how to open the box himself." Richard felt his breath catch in his throat. This child, barely 10 years old, had just described something he hadn't been able to articulate to therapists who charged $500 an hour. The treasure she spoke of. He knew exactly what she meant, though he hadn't thought of it that way before. "Well," he managed to say, his voice slightly hoarse, "I'll look forward to seeing what you create." As he walked toward his car in the parking garage, Richard couldn't shake the memory of Mia's words or the strange certainty in her young voice. The child had seen something in him that he had thought was invisible, buried so deep that not even he could reach it anymore. The next evening, Richard found himself staying later than usual, claiming he had phone calls to make to European clients, though the truth was far simpler. He was anticipating Sarah and Mia's arrival with an eagerness that both surprised and unsettled him. When 8:30 finally came, he heard the familiar squeak of the cleaning cart and felt his pulse quicken like a teenager waiting for a first date. "Mr. Carson!" Mia's voice rang out as she practically skipped down the hallway, her backpack bouncing against her small frame. Her face glowed with excitement, and she clutched a folded piece of paper against her chest, like it contained the secrets of the universe. "I finished it," she announced, her blue eyes sparkling with something that looked almost like starlight. "But it's different than I thought it would be, different than all my other drawings." Richard accepted the paper, noting how Mia's small hands trembled slightly as she released it. There was something electric about the moment, as if the air itself had become charged with possibility and danger. Sarah hung back near the cleaning cart, something troubled flickering across her beautiful features. Over the past year, she had learned to recognize when one of Mia's drawings was more than just artwork, when her daughter had accessed that mysterious gift that both blessed and burdened her young life. "Sometimes," Mia said quietly, her voice taking on a quality that seemed older than her years, "my drawings show me things I don't understand right away, but I always know they're important. This one." She paused, studying Richard's face with those penetrating blue eyes. "This one is the most important I've ever drawn." With hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts without trembling, Richard slowly unfolded the paper. What he saw made his entire world stop spinning on its axis, made his heart forget how to beat, made his lungs forget how to draw breath. The drawing was masterful, rendered in colored pencils, with a skill that defied explanation. There he was, captured with photographic accuracy. His grey eyes, his sharp jawline, the small scar near his left temple from a childhood bicycle accident that most people never noticed. But he wasn't alone in the picture. Standing beside him, solid and real and heartbreakingly familiar, was a small boy with light brown hair and Richard's own grey eyes. The child wore the blue dinosaur t-shirt he'd been wearing that last day, his face lit up with the joy that had been his defining characteristic. 4-year-old Daniel Carson, who'd been dead for 6 years, who lived now only in the darkest corners of his father's shattered heart. And behind them both, arms outstretched in a gesture of infinite love and protection, stood a figure in flowing white robes. The face was kind and knowing. The hands bore the marks of ancient nails, and around the entire figure radiated a light that seemed to emanate from the paper itself. Jesus Christ, drawn by a 10-year-old girl who had never met the subjects of her impossible portrait. The paper slipped from Richard's nerveless fingers like a leaf, falling in slow motion, floating to the marble floor with the weight of worlds shifting on their axis. His face had gone completely white, all color draining away until he looked like a ghost of himself. His hands shook violently as he stared at the impossible image now lying at his feet, his carefully constructed reality crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. "Mr. Carson!" Sarah rushed forward, her brown eyes wide with alarm as she reached for his arm to steady him. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a—" She stopped abruptly as her gaze fell on the drawing, her words dying in her throat. But Richard couldn't hear her concern, couldn't feel her steadying touch. His entire being was focused on the impossible image Mia had created, his mind reeling as he tried to process what his eyes were showing him. This child had drawn his deepest secret, his most carefully guarded pain, the memory he had buried so deep that most days he could almost convince himself it had never existed. There he was in loving detail, Daniel Carson, age 4 years and 3 months, captured not as Richard remembered him in those final terrible moments of twisted metal and shattered glass, but as he had been in life, radiant with joy, eyes sparkling with the innocent wisdom that had made everyone who met him fall in love with his spirit. The boy's pose was natural, unforced, as if Mia had been drawing from life rather than from impossible visions. Daniel's small hand seemed to reach toward his father in the drawing, his expression one of pure love, untainted by the tragedy that had separated them. Around him radiated a peace that Richard had forgotten could exist, a serenity that spoke of pain, ended, and healing begun. "Daniel," Richard whispered, the name falling from his lips like a prayer spoken in a cathedral of silence. It was the first time he had said his son's name aloud in 6 years, the first time he had allowed those 2 syllables to exist in the world beyond the tormented privacy of his own mind. Mia knelt gracefully beside the fallen drawing, her small fingers tracing the figure of the little boy with reverent gentleness. "He's so beautiful," she said softly, her voice carrying an otherworldly quality that made the hair on Sarah's arms stand up. "He has your eyes, but his smile is different, lighter, like he knows a wonderful secret that makes all the scary things not scary anymore." Richard's legs gave out completely, and he collapsed into his leather desk chair with a sound that was half gasp, half sob. His breath came in short, sharp pants, as if he had been running for miles, and his heart hammered against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. No one knew about Daniel. No one in this building, no one in his current life, no one in the world he had constructed from the ashes of his previous existence. He had never spoken of his son to anyone at the company, had never mentioned the accident that had stolen both his wife Eleanor and his precious boy on a rainy Tuesday evening that had torn his world in half and left him bleeding from wounds that would never heal. The guilt had nearly destroyed him. He was supposed to have picked them up from Daniel's friend's birthday party, supposed to have been the one driving through that intersection when the drunk driver ran the red light. Instead, a last-minute board meeting had kept him chained to this very office while Eleanor loaded their laughing son into her sedan and drove toward destiny and death. "How?" he managed to croak, his voice raw and broken. "How is this possible?" Sarah picked up the drawing with trembling hands, her eyes widening as she took in every impossible detail. The artistry was beyond anything she had seen from her daughter before. This wasn't the work of a 10-year-old child, yet she had watched Mia create it, stroke by careful stroke. "Mia, sweetheart," Sarah's voice quavered as she knelt beside her daughter. "Where did you see this little boy? When did you see him?" "He was standing right next to Mr. Carson when I was drawing," Mia replied with the matter-of-fact tone children use when describing the miraculous as mundane. "He kept smiling and pointing at Mr. Carson's heart, like he wanted to remind him of something important. I think he wanted me to put him in the picture so his daddy would remember that love doesn't disappear when people go to heaven. The words hit Richard like physical blows, each syllable driving deeper into his chest until he could barely breathe. You said he was pointing at my heart. Mia nodded solemnly, her blue eyes holding depths that seemed impossible for someone her age. He seemed young, but very wise too, and he kept trying to tell you something, but you couldn't hear him, so he asked me to help. She paused, tilting her head as if listening to whispers only she could hear. And the nice man, with the bright light around him, he told me his name was Daniel. Richard's world tilted on its axis. The room spun around him as 6 years of carefully suppressed grief, guilt, and agonizing loneliness crashed over him like a tsunami. His son's name, spoken by a child who had never heard it before, confirmed the impossible truth of what he was witnessing. He said not to be sad anymore, Mia continued, her young voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. He said the man in the white robes is taking very good care of him, and that he's not hurting at all. He's waiting for you with someone who loves you both very much, a pretty lady with dark hair who sings lullabies. Elena. Mia was describing Elena, though she had never seen a photograph or heard a description of Richard's dead wife. The woman who had sung their son to sleep every night, whose lullabies had been the soundtrack of their brief, perfect family. Richard's carefully constructed walls crumbled like ancient fortifications under siege. 6 years of suppressed emotion poured out in a torrent that shook his entire frame. He buried his face in his hands as sobs racked his body, the sound echoing through the empty office building like the keening of a soul finally allowed to grieve. Sarah hesitated for only a moment before moving to his side, her maternal instincts overriding social boundaries as she placed a gentle hand on his heaving shoulder. Her own eyes filled with tears as she witnessed the complete breakdown of a man who had seemed unshakable just moments before. "I should have been driving," Richard choked out between sobs that tore from his chest like pieces of his heart. "I was supposed to pick them up from the birthday party, but the board meeting ran late. Always another meeting, always another deal that seemed more important than being where I was needed most." His voice broke completely as the words poured out like blood from a mortal wound. "Elena called to say she would get Daniel herself and bring him to see me at the office. They were coming here, to this building, when that drunk bastard ran the red light and he couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't give voice to the moment when his world had ended in a screech of tires and the sound of metal crushing dreams." Mia approached him with the fearless compassion that only children possess, her young face radiating an empathy far beyond her years. "Mr. Carson," she said gently, her small hand reaching out to touch his tear-stained cheek, "Daniel wants you to know it wasn't your fault. He showed me how you carry heavy stones in your heart, but those stones belong to someone else. You're not supposed to carry them anymore." The moment her small fingers made contact with his skin, Richard felt something extraordinary occur. A warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with physical temperature, and everything to do with a peace he hadn't experienced since before that terrible night. It was as if her touch had opened a door in his soul that had been locked and barred for 6 years. "He's so happy where he is now," Mia continued, her voice taking on that mystical quality that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. "But he worries about you being alone in this big building with all the sad feelings. He said the man with the scars on his hands has been waiting a very long time for you to stop running from love." Richard lifted his head and looked into Mia's innocent blue eyes, seeing something there that transcended explanation. This child, this impossible, gifted child, was speaking truths that cut straight through to his soul with surgical precision. He also said, Mia whispered, glancing toward her mother with a shy smile, that he picked out a new family for you. One with a mommy who cleans hearts instead of just offices, and a big sister who can see angels. He said you've been lonely long enough. Sarah's sharp intake of breath was audible in the quiet office. Over the past weeks, she had watched Richard transform from a distant, intimidating figure into someone warm and approachable. She couldn't deny the attraction she felt, or the way her daughter had blossomed under his attention, but the vast differences in their social and economic status seemed like an unbridgeable chasm. "How is any of this possible?" Richard whispered, studying the impossible drawing that had shattered his world and somehow begun to heal it simultaneously. Mia shrugged with the casual acceptance of someone who had never learned that miracles were supposed to be impossible. "I don't really know how it works. Sometimes when I draw, it's like I can see through a special window to places other people can't see. Mama says it's a gift from God, but it makes grown-ups nervous sometimes." Sarah knelt beside her daughter, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and concern. "Mia has been drawing things she couldn't possibly know since she was very small. After her father died, she drew pictures of him in a beautiful garden, surrounded by other people who had gone to heaven. She said he was happy and safe, that he wasn't sad anymore about leaving us behind. I thought it was just her way of processing grief," Sarah continued, her brown eyes meeting Richard's grey ones with startling intensity. "But now I don't know what to think." The three of them sat in the profound silence that follows earth-shaking revelations, the weight of the supernatural encounter settling around them like snowfall in a sacred grove. The office building hummed its mechanical lullaby around them, but within their small circle, the ordinary world had been suspended to make room for the miraculous. Finally, Richard spoke again, his voice stronger, but still rough with the aftermath of tears he had refused to shed for 6 years. "Can I keep this drawing, Mia? Can I keep this gift you've given me?" The child's face lit up with joy, so pure it seemed to generate its own light. "Of course, it's yours. It was always yours. Daniel said you would need it to remember that love doesn't end just because we can't see it anymore. And he wanted you to know that when you're ready to be happy again, he'll be cheering for you from heaven." As Richard accepted the drawing with hands that no longer trembled, he felt the first stirring of something he had thought dead forever. Hope. Not just hope for healing, but hope for a future that might include the warmth of family, the blessing of love, and the miracle of joy returned to a heart that had forgotten how to beat with anything but pain. Outside the office windows, the city lights were beginning to twinkle on like earthbound stars, and somewhere in the space between this world and the next, a little boy with grey eyes and an angel's smile watched his father take the first steps on a journey back to life. 3 weeks had passed since the night Mia's impossible drawing had shattered Richard Carson's carefully constructed world, and the transformation in him was nothing short of miraculous. The portrait now hung in a place of honor behind his mahogany desk, protected by museum-quality framing that couldn't begin to contain its true value. The image of Daniel, Jesus, and himself had become his anchor, a daily reminder that love transcends the veil between life and death. Employees throughout Carson Industries noticed the change immediately. The CEO, who had been known for his icy efficiency and razor-sharp tongue, now greeted people by name in the hallways, asked about their families with genuine interest, and even smiled occasionally, real smiles that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. The perpetual winter that had settled over the executive floors began to thaw, replaced by something warmer and infinitely more human. But the most profound changes were invisible to the corporate world. Richard found himself arriving at work earlier and staying later, not to chase profits or close deals, but to anticipate the evening hours when Sarah and Mia would arrive. Their presence had become the highlight of his days, bringing life and warmth to spaces that had felt like elegant tombs. She drew Mrs. Henderson from accounting last week, Sarah confided one evening as she carefully dusted the awards and accolades that lined Richard's bookshelf. Her movements were graceful and thorough, transforming the routine task of cleaning into something almost meditative. Mia had never met her before, but she drew her surrounded by baby cribs and said she was going to receive wonderful news very soon. Richard looked up from his computer, where he had been pretending to work, his attention fully captured by Sarah's words. "And Mrs. Henderson announced yesterday that she's pregnant with twins," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and trepidation. "After 8 years of trying and multiple doctors telling her it was medically impossible." Richard nodded slowly, no longer surprised by such revelations. Over the past weeks, Mia's drawings had become legendary throughout the building, though Sarah worked hard to keep her daughter's gift as private as possible. Word had spread anyway, as such things do, creating an undercurrent of whispered conversations and nervous glances whenever the 10-year-old appeared with her ever-present sketchpad. Mr. Thompson from the legal department asked if Mia would draw his elderly mother, Sarah continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "His family has been estranged for years, and he's desperate to reconnect before it's too late. I told him no, of course. This isn't some kind of psychic service, and I worry about exploiting whatever gift Mia has been given." "You're protecting her," Richard observed, studying Sarah's profile as she worked. The evening light from his windows caught the gentle curve of her neck, the elegant line of her shoulders beneath her simple uniform. Over the weeks, he had come to appreciate not just her beauty, but her strength, her wisdom, her fierce maternal protectiveness. "I have to," Sarah replied, turning to meet his gaze. "She's just a little girl, even if she can see things the rest of us can't. I won't have her turned into some kind of circus act or spiritual vending machine. Whatever purpose this gift serves, it has to unfold naturally." From across the spacious office, Mia's clear voice cut through their conversation. "Mr. Carson, I finished another picture. This one's really different, though, different from all the others." Richard and Sarah exchanged the look that had become familiar over the weeks, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. They had learned that Mia's different pictures usually contained the most profound and unsettling messages, visions that challenged the boundaries of what rational minds could accept. Mia approached them with careful steps, carrying a large sheet of paper that seemed to glow with its own inner light. She had been working on it for the past hour, her small face scrunched in concentration as she layered colors with the focused intensity of a master artist. Her blue eyes sparkled with excitement, but there was something deeper there too, a gravity that seemed far too mature for her 10 years. "What does this one show us?" Richard asked gently, accepting the paper from her small hands. He had learned to approach Mia's visions with the reverence they deserved, understanding that each drawing was a sacred trust from whatever divine source guided her remarkable gift. The artwork took his breath away. The drawing showed Carson Industries building, but transformed beyond recognition. Instead of cold glass and steel, golden light poured from every window like liquid sunshine. Each floor was filled with people of all ages, children, adults, elderly figures, their faces glowing with joy and hope and healing. Some carried crutches that they no longer needed. Others embraced loved ones with tears of reunion streaming down their faces. But what captured Richard's attention most powerfully was the penthouse office. There, clearly visible through windows that sparkled like diamonds, stood 3 figures. A tall man with graying hair, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a simple style, and a small girl with blonde hair that caught the light like spun gold. They stood together as a family, their faces radiant with love and purpose. "What does this one mean, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, though something in her voice suggested she already knew the answer. Mia studied her own work with the serious expression she wore when interpreting her visions. Her small finger traced the golden light flowing from the building's windows as she spoke. "I think it means this place is going to become somewhere special, not just for making money, but for healing broken hearts and bringing families back together." She paused, looking directly at Richard with those penetrating blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "And those three people at the top, they're going to help make it happen. The man who used to be sad, the woman who cleans more than just offices, and the girl who can see things others can't." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Over the past weeks, she had watched Richard transform from a distant authority figure into a man of warmth and compassion. She couldn't deny the growing attraction she felt, or the way her daughter had flourished under his attention, but the vast differences in their worlds seemed impossible to bridge. "Mia, honey," Sarah said carefully, her voice tight with emotion, "Mr. Carson has his own life, his own world. We shouldn't make assumptions about what the future holds. Sometimes drawings show us possibilities, not certainties." But that's not what Daniel tells me," Mia interrupted, her voice suddenly taking on that otherworldly quality that never failed to send chills down Sarah's spine. "He visits me in my dreams now, you know. He says his daddy has been alone too long, carrying all that sadness by himself. He says God is making a new family, one with a mummy who sees past the outside to what's really inside people's hearts, and a sister who can help other people find their way back to love." Richard felt his pulse quicken as Mia's words washed over him. Over the weeks, he had grown to care deeply for both Sarah and her remarkable daughter, but he had been afraid to voice his feelings. The last time he had opened his heart to love, it had been torn from his chest in an instant of screeching tires and crushing metal. The thought of risking that kind of pain again had seemed impossible. But watching Sarah's gentle strength, her fierce protection of her daughter, her quiet dignity in the face of circumstances that would have broken weaker people, he had fallen in love despite his determination to remain emotionally isolated. And Mia, with her innocent wisdom and supernatural gift, had become the daughter he had never dared hope for after losing Daniel. "Sarah," he said quietly, setting the drawing aside and taking a step toward her. His voice carried the weight of weeks of unspoken longing and carefully buried hope. "There's something I need to tell you both. These past weeks have been the first time I've felt truly alive since I lost my family. Mia's gift gave me back my son's memory, helped me understand that Daniel is at peace. But more than that, it gave me permission to hope for a future I thought was impossible." Sarah turned to face him fully, her brown eyes wide and searching. In them, Richard saw his own mixture of longing and fear, the careful hope of someone who had been hurt before and was afraid to trust in happiness. "I know this might sound crazy," Richard continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I know we come from completely different worlds, that people will say I'm having some kind of midlife crisis, or that you're after my money. But I've fallen in love with both of you, with your strength, your kindness, your incredible daughter who sees angels and draws miracles." He paused, running a hand through his graying hair as he struggled to find words adequate to express what his heart was screaming. "Mia has shown me that love doesn't end with death, that my capacity to love wasn't buried with Daniel and Elena. Maybe I'm allowed to build a new family without betraying the memory of the one I lost." Before Sarah could respond, Mia clapped her hands together with uninhibited delight, the sound echoing through the office like celebration bells in a cathedral. "Daniel says it's about time you figured that out. He's been trying to help me show you for weeks and weeks." He said you're both too worried about what other people think, instead of listening to what your hearts are telling you. The child's joy was infectious, and despite the magnitude of what was happening, Sarah found herself smiling through the tears that had begun to flow down her cheeks. "Richard," she said softly, using his first name for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel it too. I've been falling in love with you, piece by piece, watching you transform from someone unreachable into the most caring man I've ever known." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I'm scared. I'm just a cleaning lady with a daughter who sees impossible things. What could I possibly offer someone like you?" "You're not just anything," Richard said fiercely, moving close enough to take her hands in his. "You're the woman who brought light back into my darkness. You're the mother who raised a child so extraordinary she can bridge the gap between heaven and earth. You're the person who looked at a broken man and saw someone worth saving." His grey eyes blazed with intensity as he continued. "Your circumstances don't define your worth, Sarah. Your character does. Your strength, your compassion, your ability to find joy despite hardship, those are the riches that matter. Everything else is just window dressing." Mia looked up at them both with sparkling eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the universe compressed into 10 years of extraordinary life. "Can I draw your wedding?" she asked, with the innocent directness that had become her trademark. "Daniel says it's going to be beautiful, and there will be music that sounds like angel songs." Both adults burst into laughter, the tension breaking like storm clouds giving way to sunshine after rain. The sound filled the office with warmth and possibility, transforming the corporate space into something sacred and alive. Richard knelt down to Mia's level, taking her small hands in his much larger ones. "Would you like that, Mia? Would you like me to officially become part of your family? To be not just a friend, but someone who loves you and your mother and will always be there to protect you both?" "You already are part of our family," she replied, with the simple wisdom of a child touched by divine grace. "Daniel showed me that a long time ago, back when you still thought you had to carry all that sadness by yourself. He said you were going to be the best new daddy ever, just like he always remembered his first daddy being." Tears flowed freely down Richard's cheeks now, but they were different from the anguished sobs of 3 weeks ago. These were tears of healing, of gratitude, of joy so profound it had to find expression somewhere. As he embraced both Sarah and Mia, holding them close against his chest, he felt Daniel's presence stronger than ever, not as a source of grief, but as a blessing watching over the new family he had helped create through the impossible gift of one extraordinary little girl. Outside the office windows, the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars, bearing witness to the beginning of a love story that would prove sometimes the most powerful miracles come through the smallest hands and the purest hearts. And somewhere in the space between this world and the next, a little boy with grey eyes and an angel's smile watched his father take the final steps on his journey back to life, back to love, back to the joy that had always been his birthright. The Carson Industries building rose into the night sky, its windows beginning to glow, not just with fluorescent light, but with something warmer, something that spoke of healing and hope, and families rebuilt from the ashes of loss. Mia's vision was already beginning to come true, one miracle at a time. 2 months had passed since Richard Carson's world had been turned upside down by a 10-year-old girl's impossible drawing, and the happiness he had found with Sarah and Mia felt almost too good to be true. Their engagement had been announced quietly, without fanfare or press releases, but word had spread through Carson Industries like wildfire. The reaction from both family and the business community had been swift and largely hostile. "Richard, we need to talk." Victoria Carson's voice cut through the morning air like a blade as she swept into his penthouse office without knocking. At 68, his mother remained a formidable woman, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her designer suit immaculate, her disapproval radiating from every pore. Behind her trailed his younger sister Amanda, 32 and equally polished, her expression a mixture of concern and barely concealed disgust. "Good morning, Mother." Amanda. Richard didn't look up from the zoning applications and medical licensing forms spread across his desk. The mountain of paperwork required for the healing center he planned to build on the top floors of his building, inspired by Mia's prophetic drawing. To what do I owe the pleasure of this unexpected visit? Victoria positioned herself directly across from his desk, her pale blue eyes blazing with the righteous fury of someone accustomed to getting her way. "Don't play games with me, Richard. The entire family is talking about this ridiculous engagement to your cleaning lady. Have you completely lost your mind?" "Sarah is not my cleaning lady," Richard replied calmly, though his jaw tightened imperceptibly. "She's the woman I love, and she's going to be my wife. Mia will be my daughter. End of discussion." Amanda stepped forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "Richard, honey, we understand you've been lonely since Elena and Daniel died. Grief can make us do irrational things. But this woman is obviously after your money and that strange child of hers. Don't." Richard's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper as he finally looked up from his plans. "Don't you dare speak about Mia that way. That strange child has more wisdom and goodness in her little finger than this entire family combined." Victoria slammed her perfectly manicured hand on the mahogany desk. "Listen to yourself. You're talking about marrying a woman who cleans toilets for a living and adopting her freak of a daughter who claims to see dead people. What will the board think? What will society think? You're destroying the Carson name." "The Carson name?" Richard stood slowly, his 6'2" frame towering over both women. "Let me tell you what the Carson name has gotten me, Mother. It's gotten me a fortune I don't need. A reputation built on crushing others, and 6 years of soul-crushing loneliness. Sarah and Mia gave me something the Carson name never could. They gave me back my humanity." "This is temporary insanity," Victoria declared, beginning to pace behind the chairs like a caged predator. "You'll come to your senses eventually, but by then the damage will be done. I won't allow you to embarrass this family any further." "Allow?" Richard's voice rose dangerously. "I'm 35 years old, Mother. I don't need your permission for anything." Amanda pulled out her smartphone, swiping to a news article with practiced efficiency. "Maybe you should see this before you make any more rash decisions." She placed the phone on his desk, the headline blazing across the screen. "Billionaire CEO's controversial romance. Carson Industries, stock slides as questions, mount about leadership." Richard glanced at the article, which painted his relationship with Sarah in the most unflattering light possible, while describing Mia's gift in sensational, almost mocking terms. The piece quoted anonymous sources close to the family, expressing concerns about his mental state and business judgment. "Where did they get this information?" Richard asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Does it matter?" Victoria asked coldly. "The story's out there now. Your precious cleaning lady's 15 minutes of fame have begun. How long do you think it'll be before she shows her true colors and demands a massive settlement?" Before Richard could respond, his office door opened again. His cousin Marcus Carson entered with the confident stride of someone who belonged in corporate boardrooms. At 38, Marcus had always believed himself the rightful heir to the family empire, serving as senior vice president while harboring ambitions for the top position. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Marcus said with false sincerity, "but we have an emergency board meeting scheduled for this afternoon. Several major shareholders are demanding answers about your recent personal decisions and their potential impact on company stability. Richard felt a chill run down his spine. You called an emergency board meeting without consulting me? As senior vice president, I have the authority to call emergency sessions when I believe the company's interests are at risk, Marcus replied smoothly. And frankly, Richard, the board is concerned. Stock prices are down 12% since news of your engagement broke. 3 major clients have expressed reservations about continuing their partnerships. This is about my personal life, not my business competence, Richard said. But even as he spoke, he could feel the carefully laid trap closing around him. Marcus moved closer to the desk, his expression one of carefully calculated concern. Richard, you know I've always supported you, but converting company property into some kind of spiritual healing center, using corporate resources to promote a child's alleged supernatural abilities, the board sees this as a significant deviation from our core business model. The healing center will be a separate non-profit entity, Richard protested. I'm using my own money, not company funds. But you're using company property, Amanda interjected. Property owned by shareholders, not by you personally. The board has legitimate concerns about the appropriateness of mixing business assets with what many view as questionable spiritual practices. Victoria stepped forward, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she had perfected over decades of social manipulation. Richard, the family is prepared to support you through this difficult time. We understand that grief has clouded your judgment. But you need professional help, not enabling from people who clearly don't have your best interests at heart. The coordinated nature of their attack became clear to Richard. This wasn't a spontaneous intervention. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to isolate him from Sarah and Mia by destroying his credibility both personally and professionally. Get out, Richard said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous undertone. All of you, get out of my office, out of my... And the board meeting is at 3 o'clock, Marcus said as he turned to leave. I strongly advise you to attend. Your absence would only fuel more speculation about your mental state. As the 3 family members prepared to exit, Richard heard a familiar sound in the hallway, the squeak of Sarah's cleaning cart. His heart sank as he realized she and Mia were about to walk into the aftermath of this confrontation. But before he could warn them, a small voice from the doorway cut through the tension like a sword of light. She's not a gold digger, and I'm not a freak. Everyone turned to see Mia standing in the entrance to the office, her small frame dwarfed by the massive doorway, but her presence filling the room with an authority that defied her age. Sarah appeared behind her, her face pale but determined, clearly having overheard at least part of the hostile conversation. Mia, sweetheart, we should go, Sarah said quietly, but Mia shook her head with the stubborn determination that had become her trademark. No, Mama. They need to hear this. The 10-year-old walked further into the room, her blue eyes fixed on Victoria, with a steady gaze that made the older woman step backward involuntarily. I know you think my mama wants Mr. Carson's money, but she cried for 3 whole nights after he proposed because she was scared people would think exactly that. Mia's voice carried that otherworldly quality that always preceded her most profound revelations. And I know you think I'm crazy because I can see things other people can't. But Daniel is standing right behind you, Mrs. Carson, and he's very sad about the mean things you're saying about the people he loves. Victoria's face went ashen. You little... He says you used to read him bedtime stories when he was little, Mia continued, her eyes now focused on something beyond the physical world. He says you made the best chocolate chip cookies in the whole world, and you always let him lick the bowl, even when Mama Elena said it would spoil his dinner. He wants you to know he's not angry about the accident, and he wishes you would stop being angry too. The room fell into absolute silence. Victoria's hands began to shake, and for the first time in decades, tears appeared in her pale blue eyes. Daniel had indeed loved his grandmother's cookies, had indeed been allowed to lick the mixing bowl, despite his parents' protests about spoiling his appetite. He also says, Mia added softly, that he picked out Mama and me special for his daddy because he knew we would love him exactly the way he needs to be loved. He says families aren't just about blood, they're about hearts that choose to beat together. Amanda stared at the child in shock, her hand unconsciously moving to her still small but growing belly. At 12 weeks pregnant, she had only recently begun to show, and the morning sickness was finally subsiding. How could you possibly know about the cookies? About the bedtime stories? Mia smiled with the serene wisdom that adults found both compelling and disturbing. Daniel tells me lots of things. He wants his whole family to be happy again, including you. He says Grandma Victoria has been carrying sad stones too, ever since the accident, and that's why her heart got so hard. Victoria sank into one of the leather chairs, her composure completely shattered. This isn't possible. Children don't just... People can't. Daniel says to tell you about the music box, Mia continued, walking closer to the devastated woman. The one with the ballerina that you gave him for his 4th birthday. He says you wound it up and played For Elise for him the night before he went to heaven. He wants you to know the song still plays for him there, and sometimes he dances with the angels. Victoria's carefully constructed mask crumbled entirely. The music box had been a special gift, something only she and Daniel had shared. The night before the accident, she had indeed wound it up in his bedroom, watching him giggle as the tiny ballerina spun to Beethoven's gentle melody. It was a memory she had shared with no one, a precious moment she had locked away in her heart. "My God," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My God, how is this possible?" Daniel says love never dies. It just changes shape," Mia replied gently. "And he says he's been trying to tell you that for 6 years, but you couldn't hear him because your heart was too full of angry feelings. He wants you to know that Mr. Carson being happy doesn't mean Daniel gets forgotten. It means Daniel's love gets to grow bigger." Richard watched in amazement as his mother's wall of hostility crumbled before the simple truth of a child's words. Amanda stood frozen, her worldview shifting like tectonic plates beneath her feet. Even Marcus seemed shaken by what he had witnessed, though his expression quickly returned to calculated composure. "He has one more thing to tell you," Mia said, her voice growing softer as the supernatural connection began to fade. "He says the new baby is going to be a boy, and he's going to have the same grey eyes as his big brother. His name is going to start with D too, like Daniel." Amanda gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. The ultrasound appointment that had revealed the baby's gender was scheduled for next week, but somehow this child had already seen what medical science had yet to confirm. The doctor said it was too early to tell," Amanda stammered. "How could she possibly know?" "Daniel is very excited about being a big brother in heaven," Mia continued with a gentle smile. "He says he's going to watch over baby David just like he watches over all of us. He says love multiplies. It doesn't divide." Sarah moved to her daughter's side, wrapping her arms protectively around Mia's small shoulders. The effort of channeling Daniel's messages always exhausted the child, and she could see the familiar signs of spiritual fatigue beginning to show in her daughter's face. Victoria looked up at Sarah with tear-filled eyes, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. I owe you an apology, both of you, I thought, G. I assumed the worst without knowing anything about who you really are." "You were protecting your family," Sarah replied gently, her voice free of any anger or resentment. "I understand that. If someone I didn't know wanted to marry the man I loved, I'd be suspicious too." All I can tell you is that I love Richard with everything I have, and I would never hurt him or take advantage of his kindness." Marcus cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional turn the confrontation had taken. "This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the business realities we're facing. The board meeting is still happening, Richard. They're going to want concrete answers about your plans for the company." "Then I'll give them concrete answers," Richard replied firmly. "The healing center will be built according to all applicable codes and regulations. It will take approximately 18 to 24 months to complete all necessary approvals and construction. In the meantime, Carson Industries will continue operating exactly as it always has." "And if the board votes no confidence?" Marcus pressed. "Then I'll respect their decision," Richard said calmly. "But I won't sacrifice my family's happiness for a business that's supposed to serve me, not the other way around." As Victoria and Amanda prepared to leave, the older woman paused at the door. "Richard, we've made some terrible mistakes today. That child, what she knew, there's no logical explanation for it." "Sometimes the most important things don't have logical explanations, Mother," Richard replied. "Sometimes we just have to have faith." Victoria nodded slowly, then looked at Sarah with genuine curiosity rather than hostility. "Sarah, would you be willing to have coffee with me sometime? I think I need to get to know the woman my grandson chose for his father." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile she had managed since the confrontation began. "I'd like that very much, Mrs. Carson." After they left, Marcus lingered in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Richard, I hope you know what you're doing." Oop. "This isn't just about family anymore. It's about the future of everything our grandfather built." "Our grandfather built this company to provide for his family," Richard replied. "That's exactly what I'm doing too." As the office finally emptied, the three of them stood together in the quiet space, processing the emotional storm that had just passed. Mia leaned heavily against Richard's side, the spiritual exertion having drained her small reserves of energy. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Richard asked, lifting her into his arms like the father he was becoming. "I'm tired," she admitted, resting her head against his shoulder. "But Daniel is happy. He says his family is starting to heal, just like he hoped they would." Sarah looked up at Richard with worry in her brown eyes. "The board meeting, the company politics, what if they try to force you out? What if supporting us costs you everything your family built?" "Then we'll build something new together," Richard replied firmly. "The three of us, as a family. But I have a feeling that won't be necessary. Daniel wouldn't have brought us together just to watch it all fall apart." As the afternoon sun streamed through the office windows, Richard prepared for what might be the most important board meeting of his career. But for the first time in 6 years, he wasn't facing the future alone. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would meet them with the love and strength of the family that had saved his soul, a family chosen not by blood, but by hearts that had learned to beat together. The Carson Industries boardroom had never felt more like a battlefield than it did on that cold December afternoon. 12 of the company's most powerful shareholders sat around the mahogany conference table, their faces displaying varying degrees of concern, skepticism, and barely concealed hostility. At the head of the table, Richard Carson maintained his composure despite feeling like he was walking into an ambush. "Gentlemen, ladies," Richard began, his voice carrying the authority that had built his reputation, "I understand you have concerns about recent developments in my personal life and their potential impact on the company. I'm here to address those concerns directly." Board Chairman Harold Westbrook, a stern man in his 70s who had known Richard since childhood, leaned forward with the weight of someone delivering an unwelcome verdict. "Richard, we've been friends for decades, but friendship doesn't override our fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. The company's stock has dropped 15% in the past month, and 3 major clients have expressed reservations about our stability." Those are temporary market fluctuations, Richard replied calmly. Carson Industries' fundamentals remain strong. Our quarterly projections show continued growth across all sectors. The fundamentals aren't the issue, interjected board member Patricia Wells, a sharp-eyed woman who controlled a significant block of shares through her investment firm. The issue is leadership stability. You're proposing to convert valuable commercial real estate into a... what exactly? A spiritual healing center based on the alleged supernatural abilities of a 10-year-old child. Marcus Carson, seated to Richard's right in his capacity as senior vice president, spoke with carefully measured concern. Richard, I've tried to support your vision, but I have to echo the board's concerns. Converting the top 5 floors of our headquarters into a non-profit facility will cost millions in renovations and lost rental income. The insurance liability alone could be staggering. I've already secured separate non-profit status for the Carson Center for Healing and Hope, Richard explained, producing a folder of legal documents. The center will lease the space from Carson Industries at fair market value. All renovations will be funded through private donations and my personal resources, not company funds. But what happens when this experiment fails? Asked Robert Chen, the newest board member and a vocal skeptic from the beginning. What happens when families of sick children sue us because this little girl couldn't perform the miracles they expected? What happens when medical authorities shut us down for practicing without licenses? The center will operate under strict medical oversight, Richard replied firmly. We've already consulted with physicians, licensed therapists, and child psychologists. The facility will provide legitimate grief counseling, art therapy, and family support services. Any spiritual elements will be clearly presented as personal faith-based experiences, not medical treatments. Harold Westbrook exchanged glances with several other board members before speaking again. Richard, we've known you since you were a child. You've built this company into a global powerhouse through intelligence, determination, and ruthless business acumen. But what we've seen over the past few months, the radical personality changes, the unconventional relationship, the sudden interest in supernatural phenomena, it raises questions about your judgment. My judgment? Richard's voice remained level, but steel crept into his tone. My judgment built this company from a regional firm into an international empire. My judgment has generated over $2 billion in shareholder value over the past decade. Are you questioning that track record because I've chosen to find happiness with a woman you consider beneath my social status? It's not about social status, Patricia Wells interjected. It's about the company you're keeping and the decisions that flow from those relationships. This child's alleged abilities are documented and verified, Richard interrupted. Dr. Helen Rodriguez, one of the country's most respected child psychologists, has evaluated Mia extensively. Her conclusions are part of the legal record. Marcus leaned forward, his expression one of reluctant duty. Richard, I've watched this situation develop with growing concern. I think you're being manipulated by people who see an opportunity to exploit your grief and loneliness. The timing is suspicious. This woman appears in your life just as you're most vulnerable, bringing with her a child who claims to communicate with your dead son. Be very careful what you say next, Marcus, Richard warned, his composure finally beginning to crack. I'm saying what everyone else is thinking, but afraid to voice, Marcus continued. This elaborate con game is designed to separate you from your money and your company. They've studied you, learned your weaknesses, and crafted the perfect emotional manipulation. The boardroom fell silent as Richard stood slowly, his 6'2" frame towering over the seated figures. When he spoke, his voice carried the deadly quiet of a man pushed beyond his limits. In all my years running this company, I've made exactly 3 decisions based on emotion rather than pure business logic. The first was keeping my grandfather's portrait in the lobby instead of converting that space to profitable retail. The second was maintaining the company's original headquarters in this city instead of moving to a tax haven overseas. And the third was falling in love with Sarah Martinez and choosing to build a life with her and her daughter. Richard walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline that had been the backdrop for his entire career. Those three emotional decisions have given this company its heart, its identity, and its future. Without them, Carson Industries would be nothing but another soulless corporation extracting profit from whatever market would tolerate us. He turned back to face the board, his grey eyes blazing with conviction. Sarah Martinez has never asked me for money, jewelry, or any material thing. When I proposed, she cried for 3 days because she was terrified people would think she was a gold digger. Her daughter's gift isn't something they've monetized or exploited. It's something they've tried to protect from exactly the kind of cynical commercialization you're suggesting. Harold Westbrook shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Richard, we're not questioning your character or your love for this woman. We're questioning whether your emotional involvement has compromised your ability to make objective business decisions. Then let me make this decision very objective, Richard replied, returning to his seat with renewed composure. Carson Industries will continue operating exactly as it has for the past decade. The Healing Center will be a separate entity that enhances our corporate reputation without compromising our core business. Any board member who votes no confidence in my leadership is welcome to sell their shares back to the company at current market value. The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished fire. Several board members exchanged nervous glances, clearly unprepared for Richard's direct challenge to their authority. Marcus spoke into the silence, his voice carefully modulated to sound reasonable and concerned. Richard, you're being emotional again. You can't force the board to rubber stamp your decisions by threatening to buy them out. I'm not threatening anything, Richard replied calmly. I'm offering a business solution to what you've characterized as a business problem. If you believe my leadership is compromised, then you should be happy to cash out your investment and move your money elsewhere. Patricia Wells consulted her notes before speaking. The legal ramifications alone could be staggering. What happens when government agencies investigate these claims of supernatural healing? What happens when medical boards challenge our credentials? What happens when religious groups accuse us of promoting false miracles or demonic influences? We handle those challenges the same way we handle any other business obstacle, with competent legal counsel, proper documentation, and transparent communication with regulatory authorities, Richard answered. The center will operate within all applicable laws and ethical guidelines, and if this little girl loses her alleged abilities, Robert Chen asked, if she grows up and can no longer perform these supernatural demonstrations, what happens to your healing center then? Then it continues operating as a legitimate grief counseling and family support facility, Richard replied without hesitation. Mia's gift is extraordinary, but it's not the foundation of the center. It's an inspiration for creating something larger than any single person's abilities. Harold Westbrook called for a 15-minute recess, during which the board members huddled in heated, whispered conversations. Richard remained at his seat, projecting calm confidence while his mind raced through contingency plans for various outcomes. When the meeting reconvened, Harold spoke with the gravity of someone delivering a momentous decision. Richard, after extensive discussion, the board has reached a consensus. We will not call for a vote of no confidence at this time, but we're implementing enhanced oversight procedures for the Healing Center project. What kind of oversight? Richard asked. Monthly progress reports on all regulatory approvals and compliance issues, Patricia Wells explained. Quarterly financial reviews of any transactions between Carson Industries and the Healing Center, and a requirement that any public statements about the center's spiritual or supernatural elements be pre-approved by our legal department. Marcus looked like he had swallowed something bitter, clearly disappointed by the board's decision not to remove Richard from power. The board also wants regular psychological evaluations to ensure that your personal involvement with this project isn't affecting your judgment as CEO. Absolutely not, Richard said firmly. My mental health is not a matter for board oversight unless you're prepared to vote no confidence and deal with the consequences. Harold Westbrook raised a hand to calm the rising tension. Richard, we're trying to find a middle ground here. The company's reputation and your personal well-being are both at stake. Surely you can understand our position. I understand that you're frightened by something you don't comprehend, Richard replied. But fear is not a sound basis for business decisions. The healing center will be built according to all applicable regulations, with proper oversight and transparent operations. If that's not sufficient for this board, then I suggest you exercise your option to sell your shares and invest in something that doesn't challenge your worldview. As the meeting concluded with grudging acceptance of Richard's terms, he realized that the real battle was just beginning. The board's conditional support came with strings attached that would make every decision a negotiation, every innovation a political fight. But as he walked back to his office, Richard found Sarah and Mia waiting for him with homemade cookies and warm smiles. In that moment, he realized that some victories were worth any price, and some families were worth fighting any battle to protect. How did it go, Daddy Richard? Mia asked, using the name that never failed to make his heart swell with pride. We won, he said simply, lifting her into his arms. Not easily and not completely, but we won. Daniel says the hard part is almost over, Mia whispered against his ear. He says the angels are getting ready to sing celebration songs because love is going to win bigger than anyone expects. As Richard held his chosen family close, he prepared for the challenges that lay ahead: regulatory battles, media scrutiny, and the enormous task of building something unprecedented in the modern world. But for the first time in his adult life, he wasn't facing those challenges alone, and somehow that made all the difference. 18 months later, Richard Carson stood at the windows of what had once been his executive boardroom, watching the morning sun illuminate the transformation throughout Carson Industries. Where corporate meeting rooms once stood, there were now bright spaces filled with children's laughter and quiet conversations of healing. The Carson Center for Healing and Hope had opened 6 months earlier, after navigating medical licensing, zoning approvals, and regulatory oversight. The impact exceeded even Mia's visions, with families traveling nationwide, seeking the unique blend of grief counseling and spiritual comfort the center provided. Daddy Richard, come see what Mrs. Patterson drew today. Mia's voice rang across the art therapy room, her blue eyes sparkling with returned joy. At 11 and a half, she had grown taller and more confident, her supernatural gift as extraordinary as ever within the center's supportive environment. Richard smiled, watching his daughter guide an elderly woman to a display case. Mrs. Patterson had lost her husband 8 months earlier and been consumed by grief until Mia drew him in a beautiful garden, holding hands with a young girl who looked exactly like childhood photographs of Mrs. Patterson. He's with your sister Jenny, Mia had explained during their first session. She's been waiting 70 years and was so excited when he arrived. He wants you to know their love for you is bigger than ever. Mrs. Patterson had transformed from a despairing widow to one of the center's most dedicated volunteers, using her grief experience to comfort others on similar paths. The drawing is beautiful, sweetheart, Richard said, examining Mia's latest work. The artistry continued evolving, but more than technical skill, her drawings carried divine love that touched everyone. Dr. Helen Rodriguez approached, her professional manner warmed by witnessing daily miracles. She had left private practice to become the center's chief child psychologist, protecting Mia's gift while ensuring normal childhood development remained priority. "Richard, we need to discuss expansion," Dr. Rodriguez said. "The Planning Commission approved our Children's Wing proposal, and we received final medical licensing. 3 other states are inquiring about satellite centers." Richard nodded, mindful of delicate balance. Word had spread through medical networks and social media, creating demand exceeding their capacity. The waiting list had grown to over 5,000 families worldwide. "We'll expand gradually," Richard replied. "Mia's gift is precious. She's still a child, and her well-being comes first." Sarah appeared, glowing with happiness since their wedding 14 months earlier. She wore professional attire as Director of Family Services, having completed grief counseling certification while managing facility operations. "The Morrison family is here for Tommy's follow-up," Sarah announced. Tommy had passed peacefully 3 months earlier, surrounded by family and certainty that death was a doorway to something beautiful. "And Victoria is in the lobby finalizing memorial garden plans," Sarah continued. Victoria had become the center's most passionate advocate, channeling her grief into supporting the mission. Richard found the Morrison family in their counseling room. Mark and Jennifer Morrison sat peacefully, their raw grief replaced by serene acceptance. "Better," Jennifer replied when asked how they were doing. "We visited Tommy's grave yesterday for his birthday and felt connected, like he was celebrating with us." Dr. Rodriguez noted their remarkable progress. Nightmares stopped, regular eating returned, back to part-time work. "We're even talking about having another child eventually," Jennifer said quietly. "Not to replace Tommy, but to honor his memory by bringing more love into the world." This was why every regulatory battle had been worth it, witnessing parents speak of love and hope instead of despair and rage. Victoria stood reviewing blueprints with architects. At 70, she had more energy than she'd possessed in decades. "Construction can begin next week," Victoria reported. "We should be ready for dedication by late spring." Sarah joined them with thick correspondence. "We've received requests from 12 cities about similar spaces, and the International Association of Grief Counselors wants to feature our design." Dr. Rodriguez received certification renewal yesterday, Sarah added with relief. "Full renewal for 2 years, with commendations for our innovative approach." Amanda Carson-Williams appeared carrying 2-month-old David. True to Mia's prediction, the baby had Daniel's grey eyes and a D name as foretold. "Mia asked me to bring David for his first visit," Amanda explained. "She said Daniel wanted to meet his new nephew here." Richard found Mia in the children's playroom with 8-year-old Rachel Anderson, helping create a memory book about her deceased grandmother. "When we make memory books, it's like building bridges between our hearts and heaven," Mia explained gently. "Your grandma sees everything you're putting here and is so proud of how much you love her." "She knows everything in your heart," Mia replied to Rachel's question about whether grandma would really know. "She wants you to know missing her is okay, but being sad all the time isn't what she wants. You have too much happiness inside to keep it locked up." Richard watched his daughter's calling, not performing supernatural demonstrations, but helping people understand love transcends every boundary, including death. As afternoon sun streamed through windows, Richard reflected on their journey. The healing center had become a beacon of hope for thousands struggling with loss and fundamental questions about death. Success hadn't come without costs. Exhausting regulatory battles, hostile media attention, constant anxiety protecting Mia's gift while allowing it to flourish. But watching his daughter help another child find peace made every challenge worthwhile. "Daddy Richard," Mia called softly. "Can you help Rachel choose which picture should go first?" "Of course, sweetheart," Richard replied, settling beside them. Looking at photographs of a smiling elderly woman surrounded by loving family, he felt Daniel's presence, not as grief, but as blessing watching over their work, healing broken hearts. Outside, the city stretched toward the horizon, filled with people carrying burdens of loss and confusion. But within the Carson Center walls, miracles happened daily through one extraordinary child who learned the most important truth. Love never dies. It transforms into something more beautiful and eternal. The memorial garden would complete soon. Satellite centers would open in other cities, and thousands more families would find needed comfort and healing. But for now, it was enough to sit on a playroom floor with two little girls, helping them understand every ending is also a beginning, and every goodbye is also a promise of reunion in the light beyond this world.